it became eventually the thing that people were focused. I had all these lofty ambitions as to what I was going to do with these ideas in the sketchbook, and that's a whole other thing. Because these were all meant for, was it going to be a comic? Was it going to be just a series of paintings? Who knows? But all these things were, coming into going into my same world that I was kind of forming in these drawings and writings and things. But gradually, taking it around to different people, and finally getting out to things like Comic-Con, and showing up, I got this reputation as, there's the guy with the sketchbook, and it got to the point where it became the thing, out of nowhere. That was the focus of my life, and I didn't plan that at all.
Welcome to Season 5 of the Drawing from Experience podcast.
Your source of relatable advice for the everyday artist.
We want you to pick up your pencils, pick up your paintbrush,
pick up your instrument, or whatever it is that you create with. Because let's face it,
this world is so much better with your art in it.
Whether you're an artist looking for more inspiration,
or an art enthusiast that loves to hear about the creative process,
you've come to the right place.
My name is Shane Isakowski.
And I'm Stefania Medeiros.
And this is the Drawing from Experience podcast.
Hello, humans. This is Stefania Medeiros here on the Drawing from Experience podcast. I am your co-host, Stefania Medeiros, and we also have...
Shane Isakowski. Hello, how are you? Yeah, what are we doing today?
Today, we're sharing our interview with Paul Komoda. As far as my personal life is concerned, I'm catching up on some Patreon prints here. For those of you who aren't familiar, I do one Patreon print per month, exclusive to Patreon, so I'm catching up on prints, and January's a little slow for me, so I don't have a whole lot more going on other than that. How about you, Shane?
Well, first I have to say that I joined your Patreon. Oh, I did the tip jar, the $1 tier, so it's not like I'm contributing huge or anything, but I did join your Patreon, so I was able to see some of the cool stuff that you have on there. So, but yeah, we just interviewed the amazing, legendary Paul Komoda. So we have this interview today on this episode, and we're super stoked to share that with you guys. Yeah, but as far as what I have going on, kind of the same stuff. I mean, I'm like, working on some art. I have some deadlines and things like that, but one thing that I just did was the LA Art Show, just as an attendee. And then there was some galleries there, some people that I know that I was super excited to go and chat with. Copro Gallery's booth was amazing. And I have some friends who had some art in that as well. Mirror's Gallery was there, and it was being run by my friend Irene, who's been on the podcast before. And then I went to a after party at Mirror's Gallery, which was super fun. Oh my God, their space. So they just opened the space in LA. It's like a 10,000 square foot space. It's huge. And and they had just opened a couple of weeks ago. I couldn't go because that's when I had COVID. And I was actually supposed to help set up this show that's there right now, and I couldn't do it obviously because of COVID. But going to see the space and everything, and just being there during that kind of atmosphere, it's kind of like after party atmosphere. So it was super fun. But if people are in the LA area, their new space is amazing. So you should definitely go check that out. They also have one in San Francisco that I've been to. And I believe their other space, I want to say, is in Denver. But yeah, it's an amazing space here in LA. So check it out.
I think it's about time we introduce our guest today.
Yeah.
For episode 127.
Yeah, why don't we do that? This interview is really great, and Paul is so he's such a humble dude, but his story is crazy, like the things that he's done and the films that he's worked on. And I've heard people talk about Paul, about essentially how legendary he is, and it's like people just in the industry just know of him, and it's just really quite something. And then when you hear him, he's just such a humble, nice, down to earth dude, so But yeah, so we're just excited, ecstatic to share his entire story. And then also the main reason that we're sharing this now is because he has a Kickstarter project called the Sketchbook happening right now. So we will be dropping that link in the show notes of this episode, and you'll be able to go and pledge for the Sketchbook project and hopefully make it happen. As of today's date of recording, he's about halfway through his goal. His goal is actually $50,000 and he's about 25,000. And he just launched this like less than a week ago, like 6 days ago. So I'm sure that it's going to get funded in its entirety. So I'm excited about it. And as soon as I can comfortably say that I can pledge, then I am absolutely going to pledge for Paul there too.
For those of you who haven't checked out Paul's Kickstarter yet or his body of work, I think that this would be a great inspiration to anybody who is looking for this is more than a sketchbook. This is a story, and this book encompasses his body of work, and you can feel, I mean, he refers to this book as a being, and it really does look and feel, I haven't held this book and I haven't seen this in person, but it looks and feels like a living being.
Yeah.
I'm so excited to see this come to fruition. And without further ado, I think it's about time we introduce our guest, Paul Komoda.
Let's just jump right into talking about all the things. And I'm sorry that you're going through a tough time. I've had moments in my life of things breaking, things being stolen, everything going to shit, and then
it all happens at once.
Yeah,
I know, it's like another
there's
thing.
Mercury retrograde right now, so
retrograde.
right.
Yeah, everyone's been saying this is, you know what?
Yeah.
Mercury and Gatorade.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wanted to obviously talk about your background a bit, of like how you got to here and everything, and you're starting as an artist and everything, but we can just kind of like talk about that kind of stuff briefly, because we want to talk to you about your Kickstarter project, about special effects and makeup, your film work, all of the things. And just to give the listeners a little bit of information about Paul here, he is an absolutely legendary artist in the sculpture world. He's a sculptor, creature designer, illustrator, and he's also an avid guinea pig dad. So we're really, really
story
excited
there too.
Yeah. So we can get into all those things. Some of the films that Paul has worked on are 2011's The Thing, I Am Legend, Black Swan, Percy Jackson, Kong, Skull Island, After Earth. What else? What other films have you worked on, Paul, by the way?
Good question. There's I'm trying to think of immediately. Did some designs for Stephen King's Dark Tower. That was one of those situations where the studio there's several studios bidding on the effects, and I was at ADI at the time, and turned in some creature designs for that one, and you put in a good week and then you just don't get a phone call back. So I was like, okay, I guess that didn't happen. And then there was kind of a long break from that. And I'm trying to think if there's anything I'd done between that point and now, because I just worked on a couple of things at Spectral Motion within the last few months.
Right. Are you allowed
principally
to talk about any of the?
I guess I can mention what I worked on. I suppose I guess not specifically what I worked on, but did some creature stuff, some sculpting for. It's going to be a Netflix show called Guillermo del Toro's Cabinet of Curiosities.
Yo,
I'm a bit of an anthology.
I am so excited about this.
And it looks really pretty cool from the things that I'd seen. So there were a couple of things being worked on at the time. One of the things was already done, and it was, I'll never get over it. I'll never stop being a total geek and like seeing there's a rod puppet of this thing, and they're moving it around, testing the drool, and I'm like, oh my god, it's so cool. And so,
love it.
And then you're just kind of thrown into you're just thrown right into it. It's like there's this thing you need to do, and it's gonna look like this, and we need to build it right now, and also, it wasn't like when working on usually you're working on a film. Yes, it's a certain pace. There's a certain schedule. It's got to get done at a certain time. But that was languid compared to what we had to work with here. We had to kind of pretty much bang stuff out like just week after week on several things, and you learn to adapt to that. But yeah, things were just sculpting away, and then getting wheeled out, the next thing comes in. So it was fantastic time, actually. It's been a
Yeah.
while since I worked on full scale, creature stuff with wet clay. And so, because I've been mostly, I either work in full scale, 1-to-1 scale things, which I love to do, or I'm working on very small micro
Right.
details on things that fit in the palm of your hand, which I did a lot of last year, actually.
Oh, okay. Was it jewelry stuff, or was it for a company or something?
I've done jewelry. It was with my friend Dave Igo. He created a company called Monstores, and we created 3 monster miniatures, kind of in the style of like a lot of 80s one-piece PVC figures, like the muscle things and monster in my pocket, all that kind of stuff. And our intention was to do something along those lines, but with a lot more visceral detail, I suppose. And so the 3 debuted a little while ago at Designer Con, and they were a big hit. So there will be more.
That's
While
great.
learning about your different mediums that you work in, because you work in such a vast amount of materials and different types of crafts and trades, I was trying to figure out the order of operations in which you began creating. And I'm going to assume and guess that it might have started with illustration, but I was having trouble figuring out if the jewelry came before sculpting or if the sculpting came first and the jewelry came alongside that.
Yeah, sculpting came first. Like the drawing came first. Then you're playing with clay, Play-Doh, whatever, those meager blobs of mucilage they give you to work with as a kid. And gradually you graduate things like Sculpey, Super Sculpey, and things like that. And so that was always kind of running neck and neck with the drawing. And the jewelry part of it came completely out of left field, because I met a gentleman in New York named Axel Stocks. There's a book out on him. He's the self-proclaimed metallic messiah. That's what he called himself. And he was New York's official. He was the surrealist jeweler. Did some incredible things with by casting like bird skulls and rodent skulls and beetle jaws, and casting them in wax, and then he assembled them to these really intricate, beautiful, crafted, very dangerous looking rings. And I just met him. It just was very serendipitous. Met him one night at this gallery called Psychedelic Solution. Me and a friend were there, and we're like, what is that? And I ended up striking up a conversation with the guy, and he was like, oh yeah, I'm looking for an apprentice, so here's my information. And at the time I was getting very disillusioned with art school. It really wasn't going where I wanted to go. And here finally was this opportunity to get into this a different realm entirely than where I'd been. And that's kind of how that started. So
did you do mostly wax carving and more of the sculptural element of jewelry making, or did you get into metalsmithing as well?
It was all the metal casting. That was all in the casters. There was like some people we'd go to in the diamond district in New York. They'd handle all the silver casting and things. And as far as like the actual prototype sculpture, I tried. Oh boy, did I try! I tried to like sculpt it in wax. This like microcrystalline, very very sticky, but carvable wax to create my first ring. And it just took forever. I didn't have the proper material, the tools to work with. I didn't have a heat pen or anything like that. So I was just working over a stove, I think. And it was rather time consuming. And so I found I just had my best results if I just went back and just used what I knew at the time, which was working with materials like polymer clay. There was one specifically that was pretty good for it. It was called ProMat. It's not around anymore, but the kind of stuff that you could carve it like clay, sculpt it like clay, but when you baked it, it had a bit of almost plastic-like flex to it. So it would take very filigree details and very thin areas, and you could put very thin areas on it without the threat of it breaking or shattering on you, which other materials certainly will. So that was my method for a little while. Just do it in clay, get a mold on that, then get waxes, and then go to silver or bronze or whatever was appropriate.
Awesome. Yeah, jewelry is an intimidating craft. I mean, with the ring sizing and having those clean edges and
it's a lot of work. And I've had people say, "What are you gonna get back into it?" I'm like, guys, not now. It's just I just can't. If I was gonna do a line or something, right now I just can't be up to 4 o'clock in the morning grinding metal. There are a couple of pieces of mine I would like to get back into circulation, but for now there's so many other things I need to do. So I say never say never, but for now I'm kind of like it's the furthest thing from my mind.
So I have a question, kind of piggybacking off of
Sure.
that, being that you've worked in so many mediums, a lot of artists, no, not even just artists, everyone, it's like pick one thing that you do and do it well and just do that thing for life,
Yeah.
And so I feel like you have not only not stuck to that principle at all.
No.
It's like you took it the complete opposite and ran with it. And you're just doing, basically the jobs that you're hired for. And so are you being guided mostly by the jobs that you are hired for, and then you're kind of going with that, and that's sort of determining most of the mediums that you're working in? And at the same time, while you're working in those mediums, are you trying to also take a break from like the commissioned and freelance work and work in other mediums that you're just doing for yourself, for your own fine art and stuff? Like, are you, or like while you're taking a sculptural job, are you sculpting at a studio and coming home and just working on your own kinds of sculptures? Like, how do you actually balance all of that, with the different mediums? And do you feel like it's like compulsory to work in all the different mediums, or is it more like each of the different mediums helps you get to a final result, whatever the
Usually
project
one
is?
helps the other generally. At least it used to. I think I used to. Oh God, I remember back in New York, I was working at this toy studio. We were doing action figure prototypes, and the place I was working at had the weirdest hours. They had no hours. It was kind of like you went in there, and if they could keep you overnight, they would. But I'd always manage to sneak out around, who knows, around 10 or something like that, and come home. Then I'd work on, after sculpting on wax all day, I'd come home and I'd work on like in pen and ink, like a quill pen, until 2 o'clock in the morning on an ongoing piece or something like that. And that was the one way to maintain an equilibrium. I could maintain that for a few days, and I'd completely burn out, like on the fourth day or something like that. But it's come into question lately how much more I want to keep doing it that way. I can't imagine myself ever not going in through different mediums and things like that. But there does come a point when you want to say, I really want to focus on this. I really want to get this on the next level, or I want to really, really improve my drawing or my storytelling, things like that. So it does come down to a point where I can't be as maybe as spontaneous as I wanted to be, and maybe have to say, okay, for whatever I'm working on this year, I really have to devote a lot of time to getting this one thing to a higher polish or a higher focus. But the reason I got into sculpting, in fact, I might get this story wrong, even though it's my story. There was a period when I could draw things to a certain point and design things to a certain point, but I was always unsatisfied because I couldn't turn them around in the drawing. I couldn't design a creature and then do, here's how he looks from the side, or here's how he looks from this angle.
Right.
And it was really frustrating because I was like, oh my God, am I just stuck to just doing things from one angle? And so when I got into sculpting, which kind of was an extension of me being my fascination with like, model kits, and I grew up building dinosaurs and things like that, all the Aurora kits and things like that. I loved all that, still do. And that gave me a sense of form. But I found actually sculpting what was in my head, if I could design something on paper, then sculpt that. Well, that was a huge, it was one of those moments where I was like, okay, I've leveled up, because suddenly I could see very clearly what things could look like and visualize them in every medium. And until it was my fourth year of art school, this is 1988, was the time suddenly things just came together, and parts of my brain that weren't communicating started to communicate. And that's where I felt that was the culmination.
Was that because of art school that it started coming together like that?
I guess I'll say art school, even though there were aspects of it that were sometimes disappointing, though I had some grand times there too. It did put me into a kind of a soup, a kind of a roiling sea of experimentation, where everything was kind of being pushed towards this, the evolution of my style and my techniques. And so it gave me some latitude where I could experiment and wind up with these fusions, I suppose, of
Yeah.
techniques.
So do you nowadays, how much time and room do you have for experimentation?
I try to make it for myself. I mean, the silver lining of the last 2 years, being what they were, is it did allow me to reinvest a lot of time in myself and, pick up perhaps where I left off 2 years ago or 3, 4 years ago and say, okay, well, where are we now? What do we need to pick up and what do I need to focus on? And that's borne some fruit. There are a couple of times in the last year or so I thought, finally, I'm able to do this thing or try this technique I haven't used in 10 years. So that's been good. But yeah, I try whenever I'm in a situation, like even in the time when I was working at Spectral Motion, you think you've got time after work. You really don't. You come home and it's like, even though you get home a little early, it's still you're just from the commute, from the whole thing. I'm just kind of exhausted. All I can sit there is like look at the screen, answer emails, and
Yeah.
kind of zone out. So maybe I could scribble a little bit, but it wouldn't be too much. So you'd wait for the weekend, and of course the weekend's just like, it's like, oh, what? It's Monday. Oh, jeez. So
Yeah.
as cool as I was kind of hankering for okay, I need to get back to stuff. So there's always that gravitational pull that gets you back to your work.
I find
What-
that so relatable hearing you talk about how it's like you can't find the time to focus on that one thing you wanted to spend some time on and focus on. I think it's an exciting time for you right now because, you have this Kickstarter and looks like you've gotten a pretty great response out of that. And
The enthusiasm's been tremendous, just from people writing me. Finally, we've been waiting for this for the longest time. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Tell us about that. So like, I know that, I'm hearing from different other interviews that you've done that like, I have not personally seen your sketchbooks in person. I hear when people are talking about them, they are like super excited. And obviously I've seen some little bits and pieces of what this book is going to look like. Having a sketchbook throughout your life and, it becoming what it is today, this has always kind of been on the back burner, like a project that you've wanted to do for a while, right? Yeah, like what kind of what has led to here to actually launching your Kickstarter?
Yeah, it's been a little while. I'll gotta say that. And again, turning the Wayback Machine to 2008, 2007. What had happened was, again, even turning the Wayback Machine even further back, 2003, 2004, 2002, is like I was keeping the sketchbook just to keep my imagination above water in a sense, because what I was doing at this toy studio at the time and other work I was doing at the time was kind of regimental. There's not a lot of self-expression in what you're doing at all. You're just kind of doing your best work. You can bring your facility with like I was doing lots of like little miniature before they started scanning people's faces. I was actually sculpting likenesses on little tiny sculptural heads for action figures and things. And so you're kind of focused in on it's very, and you can take some pride in a job well done, but there's no real imagination happening beyond a certain point. So I'd have to whenever I could, I'd go home and I just let it all out in the sketchbook. Whether if I couldn't draw it at the time, I'd write about it, or I just make a note in the corner, you need to draw this later. And it just became this kind of diary in a sense of just like, okay, you're going to do this later, or remember to do this, or here's a cool idea, here's a cool bit of inspiration, here's this dream I had, back when I was a kid. So that would be the thing, and it became this very organic kind of outgrowth of my imagination, and it became eventually the thing that people were focused. I had all these lofty ambitions as to what I was going to do with these ideas in the sketchbook, and that's a whole other thing. Because these were all meant for, was it going to be a comic? Was it going to be just a series of paintings? Who knows? But all these things were, going into my same world that I was kind of forming in these drawings and writings and things. But gradually, taking it around to different people, and finally getting out to things like Comic-Con. And showing up I got this reputation as there's the guy with the sketchbook, and it got to the point where it became the thing, out of nowhere. That was the focus of my life, and I didn't plan that at all. But was something. I was like, okay, good. At least this is a springboard. This is something where all these weird fucking ideas that are floating around in this damn thing we'll get some traction. We'll get some, momentum going if this book gets out. And so there were plans to do this way back in 2008. I remember there were some. There's every year there was always seemed to be someone interested in getting the book done, but it would always either die in the cradle, or it was just sort of like, hey, what happened to that thing, that person we're talking to? And they're like, what person? Oh, Jesus. So and at that point I moved out to LA, and then life took a completely different course for a while, and that's sort of how it works. You don't expect it to. It's like 2010 was a magnificent year. I mean, that's when I was finally working on a big creature gig with the thing and ADI, and it seemed to be, everything seemed to be really, the momentum was unbelievable at that point, and it just seemed like things were going to fall into place. And then, things got a little screwy at the end of 2010. I was living in a house in Woodland Hills, and that with about 4 other people, and it was under one guy's name, and that one guy was apparently not paying the proper people for our stay there, and we all got kicked out summarily. And so there I was, running with my computer under one arm and my guinea pig under the other, and into the dark. And then life it was a major setback for a long time, and I had to just do whatever I had to do for the next few years just to get back on track with things.
Yeah. How do you pull yourself out? Sorry to interrupt, but how do you pull yourself out of something like that? Because a lot of artists that I talk to, myself included, has had like these really difficult times where you're just like, everything is going to shit. Yeah. How do you bounce back from something like that?
It was rough. I was having panic attacks and all kinds of nauseating kind of life horror happening in the wake of that. I thought, I acquitted myself well. I found myself a new place to live, got resettled and all that, and there was work waiting for me at the studios, and so that seemed to be happening. But I don't know, the year that followed, it was a lot of it was it just let loose some weird fuckery in my head, and I just found that I couldn't function very well, and that got pretty strange. But it was just doing whatever I could just to stay afloat again. Just having to. It wasn't like the streamline kind of like, it's destiny. It wasn't like that anymore at all. It's just like, well, hey, whatever's there, I guess I got to do it, and that had its pitfalls too. There were lots of stumbling, lots of rather tense moments, but gradually, found my footing again, and got stable. Started working for things like places like Sideshow, Collectibles, and still doing the film work on occasion, and then and found myself here. In my current location, which is in Studio City right now. So, and I've been here since 2013. But again, it's been not the straightest path in the world, and only in the last few years, even with this nonsense we're dealing with right now, things are a bit more streamlined than they have been in the last 10 years or so.
Now, I have a question. When life happens,
yes,
and for artists, I feel like this can go two ways. It can either influence and inspire your work, or it could constrict and create lack of motivation and create a lack of creativity while working or trying to get through whatever it is when life happens.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel as though these instances inform your work and inspire you to create, or does it do the opposite and make you?
It does in weird unexpected ways. In fact, when I was back in Woodland Hills, in the place I'd found, and having these terrible anxiety attacks in the morning, I don't know where that came from. I'm not even kidding. I'd wake up, I'd be sleeping on the floor. It was a big place too. I was like, how did I afford this? It probably costs less than where I'm living right now. But I was on the rug, and I'd be sitting there just like, just trying to breathe, just having to get myself together just to get up and function in the morning. I'm like, oh, this is not good. But the thing that kept my head together was I had it was a very large sketchbook. It was not the one that's being published now, or will hopefully be published. but it was a big thing you carried under your arm. And I just scribble all these really crazy, very intricate, detailed scenarios and characters and scenes into it. And that brought it all together. It was like meditating in a sense, to the point where I'd love to show this at some point. It's a very different kind of book than, say, the Kickstarter sketchbook, which is more like studies, and that's very like one or two subjects per page. This is like a spazzy, just explosion of ideas and images. And out of all that, I figured, well, where's my head going? It's going back to childhood. It's going back to my earliest memories of what I was doing back then that made me happy. And I remember I kept drawing this one little character, this little monster, over and over again. Like there'd be an army of them. He was this little yellow, eye-stalked little frog fish kind of character with these claws and these feet. And he was made in a factory. There was a whole legion of them. So I began thinking, well, what would that guy look like if I drew him now? I seemed to draw him every few years. He was very cartoonish when I first drew him. But what if I drew him now with my current sensibilities of anatomy and design? And so I filled a page with these little yellow eye-stalk monsters. And whenever friends looked at this, they said, Paul, dude, you got to do something with that guy. That's gold right there. I'm like, yeah, I know, I like him too. He's fun to draw. He's drawn different shapes. You can draw him like kind of squashed out like a crab, or real skinny like a praying mantis, but I didn't have a name for him at all. I just kept on drawing him over and over again. He became kind of like my expression. He became my expression of my reaction to my life in LA, which at the time wasn't too happy. So he's got this kind of like, he always looks like he's a little appalled or just horrified by existence. And his eyes are always darting around. And gradually he gained the name. My friend Justin Humphreys suggested, we tried a few names back. We threw a few names back and forth, and none of them really stuck. Then he said one day, well, maybe Bertold, that's got something to it. So I tried it, it stuck, and now I've got a new character, and he's kind of become this emblematic thing for me that, we'll see what the future brings with him, but he's the one that everyone wants to see now. So that's certainly something good that came out of a dubious situation.
Creative Conquest.
Michael Stouffer says, finished a commission, got the ball rolling with Twitter and Clubhouse. While chatting on Clubhouse, someone checked out my OpenSea and I made my first sale. He's talking about NFTs, by the way. I also sculpted a 3D AR meditation room. So, hey, congrats on the sale, Michael. I know the NFT world is blowing up right now. And that's great that you are on there. So congrats, and congrats on the 3D AR meditation room. That sounds awesome. Deanna. I'm gonna say Deanna Troy Brita. Not sure, sorry. I'm usually a drawing kind of artist, but I've been taking a stab at photography/Photoshop. So delving into a new medium is always a victory for me, shot with Canon M50 and edited through Procreate. This artist is talking about this piece that is in the group, and it's this cool photo that looks like it was digitally altered and looks really freaking cool. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. Annette Santiago says, I made 2 really cute retro video game style animated lyric videos for my band. It was a lot of work, but I loved the old school RPG vibe I pulled off. This is the lyric video for my new single, The Boogeyman, and this is the lyric video for the remix. Notice how I varied up the background and added a character, Zoog, from the band Angel Spit. Annette's band is called Cut Like This, and it is this really cool song called The Boogeyman. And I have to say, I really love the remix, and I love that it's like Annette has definitely achieved that retro video game style, like she's saying here, and it's pretty awesome. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. If you guys want to share your creative conquests, you can find us on Facebook at the Drawing from Experience Creative Community. Now back to the show.
So this world in your sketchbook began with your childhood. And
it was always, I always wanted to tell stories. And I think behind the sculpting, the painting, the scribbling, all that stuff. I've always wanted to create some kind of cast of characters that was going through the same. I'd always create these crazy scenarios and just throw them in there, and there'd be a little. There'd be maybe 4 or 5 that would always appear, and they're still with me. So. And again, I'm not sure exactly where that's going. I'd like them to find some kind of manifestation, but I really can't make a plan, and I just have to keep on drawing them, and it'll start to make sense.
I love this like playfulness in your work, and like, you
No,
know,
thank you.
when you look at your career overall, Paul, you look at these characters and these like horrific monsters that you're creating. I'll say probably a lot of people don't look at that as playful. Like we as like monster kid, like I grew up as a monster kid.
Oh yeah.
Stefania grew up with horror movies. Like we're all like probably in that same boat where we look at that and see some kind of playfulness and things. But like, you know, I feel like there's, for artists, we kind of need to hold on to some of that childhood, you know,
I think that's essential. I think
wide-eyed,
that's
like,
the thing. Yeah.
yeah,
Oh
like
yeah.
excitement about something, to hold on to that because it inspires people so much. So I
Yeah,
think
it's the one
that really
thing I
well.
remember. This was an interview, probably the first interview with Chet Zar I'd heard years ago. I think it was on the Entheogenic Evolution podcast. But I remember the host was asking Chet, you know, well, what got you into this whole thing? He says, well, when he decided to take on painting and fine art, he said, well, what was the thing that always made me happy? And it was drawing monsters, drawing these manifestations of what was in his head. It's such a essential, it seems simple, but it's such an essential answer to what is required to do what you do. You know, if it's that weird core of, you know, of weird bliss that's within all of us that we have to tap into, I think. And I'm constantly reviewing and saying, well, okay, this is I haven't explored this thing in a while, or this thing I was obsessed with this as a kid. Am I still obsessed with that? Yes, obviously, for different reasons, but everything, like from I remember for a while there, and it's something I was revisiting recently when I visited my parents last December, was I was really fascinated with the microscopic world, the world in pond water, where you had hydras and amoebas and tardigrades and water fleas and things. And I always thought, what would be the coolest thing if you were shrunk down to a microbe size and could swim amongst those things and avoid getting eaten, hopefully. But it's all stuff like that. So that's all coming back more recently. So I really have to. There's a reason we go out into the world and we expand our horizons, so to speak. We improve our skills and we learn new techniques and things. And it's just so we can finally get the stuff that's been boiling around in our systems, in our subconscious since the beginning. And we can finally get it out in a more articulate manner, and kind of share that, and hopefully have people respond and, you know, find it in the way that you found it fascinating.
Do you find that when you do that kind of work that you are tapping into something that like has been kicking around in your head forever? Do you find that the response is bigger and better from people when they can kind of see that?
It does get this, yeah, not all the time. I mean, there are many times when people are just kind of staring at it a little bewildered.
Stumped.
Yeah, they're like, oh, okay. But when it does land, when you do get a response and they're like, where is this coming from, Paul? And I just thought, well, there's gather around, there's a story I can tell about this thing. Or it's something I had nightmares about, or it's something, you know, one of my favorite things to delve into with anyone, the thing that the subject matter that brings all to the forefront for me are just talking about nightmares, dreams, and night terrors, because I went through at least 1 year of my life. I was in the 4th grade, and it seemed like every night it was horrible. It was just like my brother Dan, he could fall dead away to sleep, and you know, and I'd be up just tossing and turning the entire night, just afraid of falling into a nightmare. And there'd be sounds and visuals and things. And it really wasn't that bad before or after that period, but it's something that now that I'm way past it, I look back on with a certain degree of fascination. And I try to recapture some of that in the work too.
I experienced night terrors myself as a child, so learning that about you, it was very interesting, and I was going to ask you how much of that has influenced your work, because like Shane was just saying, the work to us and maybe to you as well just feels so playful, but I also know that in some place you're using all of these fears and nightmares and dreams and incorporating those into your design process and what it is that you create. So I was curious about how much of that comes from the fear and the nightmares and how much of that comes from a more um, inspirational place. And I think you answered that question, but I found that really interesting that you did have those night terrors and how that contributed to your work.
Yeah, and what's interesting about that this particular kinds of experiences I had is a lot of it was not visual. A lot of it was very auditory, or it was very more of just a feeling of being really, really, really just upset and disturbed. And these are things that would carry on into my waking hours too, and in the oddest places too. We'd be at my family, I'd be with a family, and we'd be at Asbury Park in the carnival area, or we'd be at Six Flags Great Adventure or something. It's all happy and balloons and rides and stuff, but I'd be miserable. I'd be like thinking about the worst things, and it would just be this horrible nightmarish kind of loop in my head that would be playing out, and it would really affect me in kind of an awful way. And then the ride home in the dark in the car, oh God, that was the worst, to be dwelling on these things. And I don't know why that was. It was just like, I'm supposed to be, there's all this distraction around me to keep me from thinking about that, but I'm thinking about the worst things in these places. And so a lot of that stuff, even though it's kind of abstract sometimes, a lot of that tone of that I try to get into the work as well.
Were your nightmares recurring, or was it always a different scenario every time?
It was usually different, and it was usually
Okay.
because I wouldn't say, oh no, it's that again, but it was always a scenario in which it would be very very, very based in reality. It would be very vivid on that level. And then something somewhere, I'd be being in a room with my family talking, or everyday occurrences where you wouldn't think you were dreaming at all. And then something strange would be happening, like a weird dot would appear on the wall and start vibrating. I never had that dream, but just as an example, start making this weird sort of woo, woo, woo sound and start dilating like some horrible little sphincter or something. And then you'd look at that, you'd notice that, then I would go, and then it would get really loud, and then everything would explode, and I'd feel like I'm being electrocuted and screaming, and I'd see jellyfish in the air. I actually did see jellyfish in the air in one dream, and everything was just buzzing and stinging, and then you wake up, oh God. And so there was a lot of that happening, a lot of just very, very alarming sounds. You just wake up going, oh, jeez. It's probably, if that's why I listen to the music I listen to. I'm pretty sure a lot of industrial noise stuff, and just crazy, just a lot of dissonant sounds, because it kind of tunes me into some of that.
Wow.
You
What
don't
were
have
your night terrors like, Stefania?
Oh, geez. So mine, the reason why I asked Paul if his were recurring are because some of mine were recurring when
Mm.
I was little.
Mm.
And I've actually never spoken about some of these night terrors, but when I was little, I think it started at the age of 2, I would scream and cry in my sleep, and I had absolutely no awareness of it. And I went as far as sleepwalking as well. Did you sleepwalk, Paul?
I did once. I was we were in a motel someplace, I think, and this was, I was pretty young at that point. And it was the only time that I remember my parents telling me, it says, no, Paul, you were just walking around, and we tried to say, where are you going? Where are you going? And I was apparently clueless, because I did not remember that at all.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Yeah, night terrors are interesting because in most cases, from what I understand, children, I know this happens mostly with children, and when you're screaming and experiencing these night terrors, we're asleep. I don't remember any of this. And growing up, I was sleepwalking most of my childhood.
Wow. Well,
My parents had to put a lock at the top of my door so I didn't leave, because I would just unknowingly leave my house at night, and my dad
Oh,
once
wow.
found me in the driveway in the middle of the night, and I've woken up with bread in my arms. I've done the craziest things as a child. But there's this one nightmare, and another reason why I asked you if your nightmares inform a majority of the work is because I am actually terrified to try to take some of my nightmares and actually like replicate them in physical form.
Oh,
I don't
wow.
know if it's a mental thing, if I'm just not ready for that yet. And I don't think they'd sound that terrifying if I actually like talked about them, but they're so poignant for me from when I was younger, and they were so recurring that it's just like it's stained in my mind. So I'm not sure if I'm ready to visit that yet, but I found that really interesting how you were able to take those moments and experiences from your life and use that in your work.
Oh, yeah. Thanks.
Yeah.
I definitely don't want to end this interview without talking about HR Giger, because this is obviously, I feel like if this had happened to me, this would obviously be a huge highlight in my life.
Oh, my
And
God.
yeah, so I know that you've spoken about it in previous interviews about your meeting him here in the States, and then but the big which is this experience. I mean, I wouldn't know what to do with this, but like going and staying with him and his wife in Switzerland, like all of these amazing things. But yeah, if you want to briefly talk about how this even came about, and I mean, I would have passed out from excitement at some point, you know.
Yeah, no, believe me, I'll get to it, because there is that point when you become very aware of what's happening. I was like, oh my God. But
You're like, is this happening? Yeah.
yeah, I can't believe I'm just casually talking to him about like this ridiculous stuff. But how it started was, again, back to Axel, the jeweler that I was working with for many years. He'd known Giger. He'd known a lot of people in that fantastic realist scene, like Ernst Fuchs and people like that. So he'd always mentioned that he knew Giger's agent in New York, but at the time, I remember they had a major falling out. Apparently, Giger's agent had a lot of falling outs with people, but they hadn't been talking for a while. And it was only in, what year was that? 2008, I think. They resumed. I guess they buried the hatchet a little bit and were talking again. And Les, that was his agent's name, saw some of my work at Axel's place, and it was like, oh no, who's doing this? This is fantastic. And Axel gave him my information because they were trying to do like more jewelry, more sculptures for the Giger Museum. And that's pretty much how it started. Like, I got a call from Axel, said, hey, I talked to Les Barony. You got to talk to, we calling you, and looks like you got like this thing hooked up with the Giger thing. And that's pretty much how it began. I met Les in New York at his office, and we got talking about different projects and things. And he said, "Hey, yeah, well, we're doing Giger's going to be in town soon, and if we could get this one bit of jewelry done, and he wants to do this one pendant or something, that'd be a good way to get introduced, and could lead to different projects and things." And that's kind of how it started. So I remember at the time, I hadn't really started until I moved to New York, and that was 2008. That's a couple of months later, I think. And so I began that. It was a small intertwined, a pendant of intertwined biomechanoids, which are these, you've probably seen them. They're like kind of like it's an arm and a leg fused. And so there's two of them kind of intertwined like snakes in a sense, grasping their hands. And I'll never forget it. I was over at my friend, another friend I've worked with before, named Voltaire. He Voltaire at the time, he was just getting into, I guess he's more known as a singer and performer
musician,
now. But
yeah,
but he was doing lots of stop motion animation.
Yeah.
Previously, and that's kind of how I got to know. Well, it's a whole round and round we go, because it was like I met Voltaire through Axel back in the late '80s. And then I wound up working on a couple of projects with him, and then of course Voltaire knew Les, and so we were over. I just remember it was one night we were over at Voltaire's, and Giger was in town, and it was funny because it was like, oh my God, he's just going to come over, he's going to meet us here. And so we were waiting around, and then answered the door, and there he is. He was like, hello, I am Giga. And I was like, oh my God, hello, just had to contain myself. And I'll never forget it. I'll try to keep this one brief, because again, I think Giger, he was a little elevated or something that night, because he was just fascinated with all of Voltaire's sculptures and things. And I remember he had to critique this little pendant I was doing. and he had some opinions about it, and he was like, let me see, okay, I show you. And he took this little piece of, it's like a club flyer or something. He put it on. He didn't even put a piece of like anything in the back, and he was just drawing on this piece of paper on his knee, basically. And so this ballpoint pen, he's trying, you'll see that the arm must be a little thinner. They cannot look like a football player. These feet, the toes must look like fingers. And he kept poking through the paper onto his knee. He was trying to just scribble, and he was like, oh shit. No, they must be a little bit thinner and more. Scheiße. Shit. And he's kind of locked into this kind of weird paroxysm of like, of just kind of frustration, trying to explain visually what he was looking for in this piece, this critique. And we're kind of like, what's going on? And, and before you know it, he had all these little notes jotted down on this little piece of paper. And he was like, oh, man, it's something, yeah, like these, I suppose. And we just wrapped up the night and all that. And I remember and Les and Giger had split and went their ways. And then Voltaire and I were kind of sitting there kind of dazed, like, wow, did that just happen? That was kind of surreal, wasn't it? Wait, where's that piece of paper? And we're like, oh my God, we're looking all over for that little piece of paper with all the notes, the little holes all over it. And turned out Giger had actually crumpled it up and he threw it in the garbage can. And so I grabbed it, unraveled it, saved it. It's somewhere in one of my Giger books, I think. And so that was my first bit of interaction with Hans Rudy.
That's so awesome. Yeah.
But and it just basically grew from there. There'd be a project come up, and hey, we're looking for a ring, we're looking for a pendant design based on this Giger's was an emblem for a secret society thing. There was a belt buckle and a pendant, and so it's a lot of back and forth of just like me doing little sculptures of the jewelry and getting critiques from Giger back and forth, and then finally I was 2003. They found says, okay, we're gonna fly you out to Giger's place. We got a couple of projects to get you on out there, and there you go. I was like, oh my God, it's happening.
Amazing.
So
Man, that's great.
And I've never been out of the continental United States before. Here I was suddenly in Switzerland. And luckily everyone speaks English there too, which was good. It was like German, French, or English. And so that helped a lot because I would have been lost.
What did the inside of Giger's house feel like? I want to ask, what did it look like? But I feel like the necessary question is, what did it feel like? Because most of us have had the privilege to see the documentary. But there are very few who have had the privilege to be able to be inside of his house.
I think that's what's amazing about it. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was just curious what the environment inside of his house felt like, because from what the documentary was so. It was so immersive, but I want to hear firsthand like what it felt like in his house.
Oh, because I came in through, I guess there's sort of a living room area that gets very well documented in the books and the documents and the documentaries and things, where it's black, it's got all this Giger stuff everywhere, the chairs, the Harkonnen chairs and all that. The paintings are on the wall, and there's this amazing alien costume from the film. What was it called? Not Swiss Made. I think it's called Swiss Made. It was this one. It's a very on this armored suit kind of thing, and it's just kind of seated at the chair, and that's what hits you first. And so there's this utter sense of holy shit, I'm here, and yet it's utterly familiar too. And basically that entire side of Giger's house has got, again, these libraries of books. It's like that's as distracting as anything else, because you're looking at his collection of stuff. And I was just getting into Beksinski at the time, and there were huge volumes of Beksinski in there that I'd never seen before, and just getting and books on Fuchs and all these other amazing artists. And that's easy, very easy to distract you too. And of course little bits of just Gigerisms everywhere, stuff. I remember that from that book, or I remember that from wherever. Or even keeps a little just because they're fun. I think he keeps little alien toys on his shelf too. And I remember there's he really liked the initial Kenner Alien doll that came out in the 80s or the 70s, and it's like, that's good, huh? And there are some other ones that came out later there was that line. They were all very colorful, and there were like the bull alien, the gorilla alien, and things like that.
Oh, right.
And he kept a couple of, he had a few of those. He was like, those are funny, huh? So so that was great, because it was almost like we were being little kids looking at all this stuff that had come out from his brain.
Man, that's
that were inspired by things. So that was one side of his house. It was kind of black on black Giger world and all that. So Essentially, from what I knew, there were kind of like two houses kind of fused into one. And so there was kind of an attic area that was an area that I slept in when I was there. And then again, you look at it, it's sort of like you go up there and it's just a repository of all of old paintings and things. And again, castings of just everything you can imagine. Like, there's so much of, like, you'll see the alien suit mold being used many times for different kinds of projects. So you see the rib cage kind of doubled up with something else. And then in the midst of all that, you look up in the rafters and there's Kermit the Frog. There's a Kermit the Frog puppet just hanging like it's just thrown up there.
Yeah, did he collect other people's artwork as well?
Yeah, you'd see it here and there everywhere. You would always. But I think a lot of what he collected was wound up in the museum. Like, there's a big wing of the museum that was all other artists' work that inspired him or that he was friends with. So again, he saw stuff by Fuchs, stuff by this guy. It was this another metal worker. I'm completely spacing on his name right now, but he was great too. If it occurs to me, it'll come back to me. But that was the one thing. You go into this kind of purgatory where it was kind of like just stuff, and again going through all these things stacked up on the side of the wall. Going, oh my God, I remember this from Necronomicon or whatever, and all original paintings and things. And then you go down there to the other side of the room and downstairs, and it's where his wife Carmen lived, and it's a completely different tone, really. I mean, it's still Giger world, but it's like the light side of the Giger world. It's very domestic. There's a kitchen, everything's white, and it leads to the outside, the backyard or the front yard or wherever. And that's pretty much where everyone gathered for dinner. And you'd go there, and there'd be it would be Giger, Carmen, this guy, Wolfie, who helped out with their business upstairs. And there'd usually be about 2 or 3 other people that worked at his atelier at the time. It was like a couple of guys, like this gentleman named Ronnie Brandt, who did a lot of Giger's larger sculptures, like a lot of things that were on display at the museum. He did the mic stand for Korn under Giger's direction and things like that. So it was a very family environment. It's the best way I can describe it. Very warm, and this cat Mookie was running around. Mookie, don't not do that. So pretty insane. And again, it's a thing. You're there just having a great time eating calamari and sharing stories with everyone, and it's like, I can't believe this is happening. This is so cool. So yeah, and then there'd be
experience.
And there'd be those times, I swear, where I'd just be talking with him and about life and whatever, and then there's this inner little nerd inside of me that's freaking the fuck out. Like, oh, you're talking to H.R. Giger. And it's had to kind of quell that, kind of keep that from going out, because there was always a moment where he starts going, oh, this is kind of insane.
Yeah. Well, Paul, I thank you for sharing that about H.R. Giger. Of course,
absolutely.
Chat about that a little bit. But you have this Kickstarter project, and I know that you really want to focus a lot more in like kind of the fine art world, getting more of your stuff out there. What does the future look like for you over the next couple of years? Like, are you going to be doing like more gallery shows, or do you see any of that happening for you?
That's kind of been the goal. In fact, I'd say back in 2008 when I moved out here, just on the cusp of moving, I was on the cusp of actually making the leap into that realm, I think, because I remember I was meeting people like Travis Louie and Carrie Ann Bada, people like that. And it seemed like, oh my God, finally I seem to be, this is where I need to be. And there were talks with my friend Dan Willett about there's going to be a group show called The Swollen Gland, which I love the name of that. Dan came up with that. I think that should still happen.
That's great.
With a bunch of like-minded artists that we were going to do a gallery show, and it just life happened, and I was out here, and so that's been. I'll just say that's been deferred. It could still happen, and all that. But I was fully prepared to leap into that world. And even the first year out in LA, there's still that sense of like, I'm still on the path, I'm still doing what I need to do. I just have to, get established out here. So that was the main goal. And but the net result for a while there was all that was put on pause. And I was pretty much, especially when you're sculpting, that it's safe to say it's a little time consuming. And so you're basically having to devote all your time to that kind of thing. And so it was a while before I could make inroads into the fine art world again. But very quickly I found myself pretty much the same situation I was in New York, which was, I've got a job I've got to do, and the only thing I can do to keep myself to keep my imagination alive is to get back to the sketchbooks and keep those going. So that's why there's been several more sketchbooks since that one that's getting kickstarted right now. But hopefully I'm hoping that in some way if this happens, that it'll put more emphasis on where my imagination's at, and get to explore that realm a bit more in different mediums. And people always say, well, do you like sculpting better? Do you like painting better? All I can say is right now, for now, even though I love sculpting, there have been times I've not loved sculpting, but that's just circumstantial. But I find right now the drawing and the painting, that gets the ideas out quicker. That actually sets the template. So I said, okay, well, it's more important that I get the ideas out, the tone of the work out, the aesthetics of it, the weirdness of it out. And then I can start thinking about, like, okay, cool. Well, at least people know this stuff, and I can start creating sculptural projects from these things. So it's always a bit of a back and forth. Get this stuff known and then get the stuff sculpted.
Well, Paul, thank you so much for joining us. How do people find your sketchbook project on Kickstarter right now?
As far as the name's concerned, I guess just look up Komoda Sketchbook, or or the Komoda Black Book. That's another title for it, apparently.
Yeah, we'll put the link as well in the show notes.
Okay, fantastic.
But yeah, and then how do people find you online and get to see some of the stuff that we've been talking about today?
Yeah, well, I don't have a site yet. That's just been another thing. Like the sketchbook is another thing that's been kind of up in the air for a while.
You have a site. It's out there. I saw it.
There's something. There's a prototypical site out there, but it's not. It hasn't been. It's not officially out yet. Principally, people can find me on Instagram. They can find me on Facebook. I'm Twittering it. So there's a line of direct communication for me within those realms too. So that's the most I can offer at this point. But yeah, the site's actually it's still in its kind of pupil state.
Yeah, it's a pain. It's a pain to put together a website, but yeah, man, thank you so much again for joining us.
Oh, absolutely.
We really appreciate it. And good luck with funding your
Kickstarter. Oh, thanks so much.
I'm sure it's going to be funded. I have no doubts in my mind that it's going to be. And anybody that's listening, go and get the freaking sketchbook, because it is going to be amazing. I'm super excited about it.
Paul, it was so nice chatting with you today. And
absolutely.
I'm going to follow up on what Shane's saying. Paul is a visionary artist, and if you are listening to this podcast while his Kickstarter is active, please go support Paul's Kickstarter. This book, I mean, this is an incredible array of years worth of work, and I mean, down to the pages and the way they're going to be cut and made. This is something that it would be a privilege for anybody to have something like this in their possession, and I really hope to see this succeed, and I think it will succeed. So best of luck to you, Paul, and I look forward to seeing how this journey goes for you.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much.
If you guys enjoyed this episode, you can stream and download on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, or Spotify. And go on Spotify right now and rate and review us, because we want more listeners and we want people to be able to hear people like Paul's story here. You can also find us on our website, drawingfromexperience.com, or join the Drawing From Experience creative community on Facebook, or find us on Instagram or Patreon at DFE Podcast. And then you can also find my personal art on ShaneIsakowski.com or my patreon.com/ShaneIsakowski, or on Instagram or Facebook at Shane Isakowski Artist. And Stefania, where do we find you?
And you can find me on Instagram as Stefania Medeiros _ and on Facebook as just Stefania Medeiros. On Patreon, you can find me as on patreon.com/Stefania Medeiros.
Thank you so much. Paul, again, thank you so much. And
absolutely.
Good luck with the whole project and everything. Thank you again.
Thank you.